Hello everyone and welcome. This is Keela Flores with IABC. Welcome to today's Solution Provider webinar, How to Create Connections that Strengthen Community. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Feel free to direct questions that you may have to the Q&A box, not the chat window. We will review the Q&A box and go over all questions at the end of the webinar. We will also be sharing the slides along with the recording following the webinar. Our speaker today is Abby G. As Global Comms Solutions Lead, Abby is a comms industry expert for the Workplace by Facebook team globally. Her focus is on advising our high-value customers on comms best practice, trends, and thought leadership, as well as working closely with their engineering and product management teams, specifically with their comms customers in mind. She also leads Workplace's Connected Executive Program, providing leadership engagement coaching to C-suite leaders and senior comms teams who counsel them. Prior to Workplace, Abby held a number of senior-level comms and marketing roles, both in-house and agency side, most recently as the Global Head of Social Media Engagement at HSBC and Ketchum's UK Head of Digital. Our sponsor today is Workplace by Facebook. Workplace is a communication and collaborative platform for businesses. It uses familiar Facebook features like chat, video calling, posts, and groups to connect everyone in an organization. The platform is designed to make business better by building strong internal communities and by helping companies become better connected. This is done by offering open channels for feedback and collaboration through comments, reactions, and likes, as well as polls to gauge employee sentiment. And now I'd like to turn it over to Abby.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully you can all see me and I've come up onto your camera. I'm very happy I can't see my own face on here. So I'm dialing in from London, from my apartment in London, and London is where the Workplace team are headquartered from. Fun fact for those of you that haven't heard from me before, we are the only product within the Facebook family that is headquartered outside of the US. So as Kayla said, today I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking to you about how to create connections that strengthen community in your organizations. Why do we want to focus on community specifically? Well, for us, and for I'm sure for many of your organizations, you've really found that community is the glue that binds your companies together, because the more connected people are, the better that work becomes. And with the outbreak of coronavirus, all of us are learning why it's never been more important for organizations to reinforce this sense of community for everyone at work. So as Kayla said, I'm going to be hosting a Q&A at the end of the session, but please do post into the Q&A box, not into the chat box, as your questions come to you throughout the session, and we will answer as many as we can in the time frame. From previous IABC webinars that I've run, you always have a huge amount of questions, so please do keep them coming. And a question that always comes, we will be sharing a PDF version of the slides. So I'm sure, like many of you, like me, you are currently working from home rather than being in your normal working environment to get work done. Or you may have been furloughed and will almost certainly be building community in a different way. So if this is your current norm, this video should look familiar. I know it does me.
Welcome to my new office. This is where I work, for now. This is my seat, and these are my colleagues. It might get busy at times, but we've got ways of dealing with that. Our meeting rooms are pretty high-tech. Sometimes we're joined by the odd visitor. We spend the day working together. We talk to our customers. We hire new talent. We share our ideas. And we make sure everyone knows what's going on.
Incredible.
Yes, we're spread far and wide for now, but we're not disconnected. This is my new office. It's where we make plans for the future, where we move forward. And it's where we get the job done, all of us, together. Workplace from Facebook. Be a part together.
I really wish I could show you what my current setup is here, because I am standing in my kitchen with a dresser with 2 cardboard boxes and then a laptop to get me at the right height. So, you know, this video really rings true for you. Some of you might be aware of the stat from a Gallup survey back in 2018, which found that 2 out of every 3 employees feel disengaged and disconnected from their job. Just let that sink in. We will spend on average 90,000 hours, or a third of our lives, at work. And the overwhelming majority of people won't get that much out of it because they're not engaged with it. And it's not from a lack of trying, obviously. You know, we spend billions of dollars in recruitment, in retention, in benefits, in morale boosting opportunities, and even more on expensive IT tools to get more productivity from our employees. But the thing that's been overlooked the most, and something that we're going to talk about today, is the crucial ingredient that binds and makes employees engaged, and that's connections. The closer people are, the better that work becomes. For those of you that have joined one of my webinars before, you know that we talk a huge amount about connected companies at workplace, and we genuinely believe that in the modern workplace that connected organizations are the most successful ones. But what do we mean by connected organization? We mean those that are empowered to give everyone in your organization a voice. They're connected from top to bottom, where teamwork and collaboration is not just encouraged, but is built and designed for, and where systems and tools are integrated and seamless, and where business feels like a community. Luckily, the same Gallup survey from the previous slide shows that engaged organizations, connected organizations, where people feel connected to each other in their work, are more profitable, they're more productive, and have 40% less talent turnover than their competitors. There's only one place where the effects of being disconnected are felt 10 times more than anywhere else, and that's on the front lines of your business. These are the people that will never see an office. Now, this stat was obviously before COVID-19, which made pretty much half of the world deskless. But a recent study put the percentage of the global workforce who are always deskless at 80%. That's 2.7 billion people who are distributed, multi-generational, mobile first, often hourly, not salaried employees, and frequently have no corporate email or device. And it's so important that these people are reached. All that knowledge and potential that they have are going to waste. In June last year, as Workplace, we surveyed 4,000 frontline workers in the US and the UK, and we found that unsurprisingly, they don't feel like they have a voice in business. Over 50% of them feel that they don't have a voice. Only 14% feel connected to their company HQ or the overarching brand. And a quarter of them have had a great idea, but they've had no idea where to share it or who to tell it to. These are the people who work with your customers and your primary audiences every single day. So what kind of effect does that have on your business? For many organizations, the coronavirus pandemic has accelerated digital transformation programs and really refocused them around building organizations that celebrate their people and recognize that their people matter. What COVID-19 has done is pushed employee experience within organizations to the front of the queue. And it's absolutely something that we're seeing across every industry and every market in which we support customers. Industries who formerly prohibited work from home have been left with no choice than to embrace it. And mandated corporate dress codes now see business being done on a regular basis, on a minute-by-minute basis, whilst people are in jeans and shorts. So it's been great to see organizations also recognize that it's not normal remote working. And the added strain and stress of the pandemic on both personal and professional life needs to be addressed. And I really liked this example on the right-hand side from the Canadian federal government that I saw on Twitter, providing employees with additional guidance on how to create boundaries between work and personal life. But some organizations like ourselves here at Facebook have taken it a little bit further and announced that remote working can be continued indefinitely after the pandemic. But this decision will also help us at Facebook advance some of the future technology we're working on around remote presence, because we're just not going to be developing it. We're actually going to be using it constantly ourselves. We already use features like video chats all day long, and we live on Workplace ourselves at Facebook. But I think also for VR and AR, this could really accelerate what happens within this space. So with the shift to remote work at Workplace 2 weeks ago, we announced that we're doubling down on video collaboration so companies can strengthen their community and get work done. So we've announced new features like Workplace Rooms, a new way for co-workers and teams to stay connected, hang out and get things done when they cannot get together in person. As well as Live Producer, which is a new way for people to go live on Workplace, like your leadership team, from a desktop with better production value, control and interactivity, and also have automatic live captioning in currently 6 languages, as well as automatic caption translations and editing. And we're really seeing our customers' leadership teams really embrace their commitment to creating community within their organizations by being visible and accessible during coronavirus. And really, the organizations that I've been working with across the world have their activities at present are focused on these 5 core areas. First and foremost, it's about informing and staying in touch with employees, but also answering any questions that they have. Secondly, showing care, both in terms of health and safety, but also by communicating people policy changes, as well as operational changes. I don't know about you guys, but I have never seen so much policy change happen in such a short and fast amount of time. I mean, I've tried to get policy changed in business years ago, and it's it's always been a 12-month cycle to get it done. So it's been really impressive to see how organizations have been able to rally around archaic processes. Thirdly, understanding sentiment and getting an instant read on the health of their online community. Crisis planning and communication. We're seeing obviously disaster recovery groups, emergency comms groups, all basically coming together in secret groups within Workplace. And then last but certainly not least, enabling collaboration, both in terms of enabling people to continue to work together, but also helping with the mental health implications of prolonged periods of isolation. And Workplace has really been playing a key role in supporting culture and sustaining morale at this time. Now, I'm sure many of you would agree that only about 20% of communication that gets created needs to be seen by everyone in an organization, sometimes even less than that. So you want to ensure that your content cuts through and reaches the right people, but that you're able to connect and collaborate with people as you do that. So groups are a great way to hold in-depth discussions and share information and documents. We recommend creating separate groups for each team, project or interest so that you can bring people together and build smaller communities within your wider organizational community. And you can decide on how private you want each group to be and who's allowed to post. Every company group structure that I look at is entirely unique to each company. But here are some examples of how we've seen companies create specific groups around the coronavirus outbreak. So from a specific group looking at coronavirus updates through to work from home tips and tricks for those people who are not used to remote working. But no matter how you choose to share information, people will want to ask questions and or share feedback. So it's unlikely that there will be a single person executive team who will be able to address every single question that's being asked or indeed have the time to do that. So instead, we recommend assigning specific areas of responsibility across your communications, HR and leadership teams, and then working with each team to provide timely answers and really ensuring that you cascade this information out to managers, to line managers, so that they also feel empowered to answer questions directly. So we also recommend creating separate groups for managers to share talking points or frequently asked questions so that they can address important issues confidently and consistently. So a few examples of culture and well-being content that we've seen from across the workplace community. On the left-hand side, my favorite group within Facebook, which is called Sad Work from Home Meals, and it is as sad as it sounds. So this poor gentleman, this is his lunch that he's made for himself at home, and it's just a dry burrito, hot dog, and some chips. I'm sure it's very tasty, but it looks incredibly dry. And what we've seen is, as many of you will know, there's a great culture of food at Facebook, and we normally have amazing chefs prepare food for us on a daily basis, and we've all had to come home and obviously learn to be our own chefs. And this has been a really great way of actually rallying the community and sharing just disastrous cooking that we've all been seeing over the last few months. And even Mark Zuckerberg himself has dropped a couple of terrible examples into the Sad Work from Home meals. Moving into the center, we have team meetings that are, people coming together to have lunch, to have coffee hours, and also to have little fun things that they do. So this one here specifically is around, they all had to wear a hat to the team meeting, and then share a story about how they got and acquired the hat, and you had to guess whether that was a truth or a lie. Bottom left-hand side and then bottom middle, we have a number of organizations who are customers of Workplace that are in the hospitality or travel industry and have had to, and retail, that have had to furlough their communities or their people, and rather than close off their communities, they have built them up to really celebrate culture and well-being. So this is quite a good example of actually seeing like where weekly planners are coming out with different activities that people can opt into and still keep that community going. And then on the far right-hand side, we have an example from UNICEF, and this is one of hundreds that I've seen of giving tips around how to prepare, how to work virtually, but also just what you should do if you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed at this time. Over the past several years, diversity and inclusion has gained widespread recognition for being essential to the long-term success of any business. And diversity and inclusion, as all of you know, is about giving everyone a voice and providing psychological safety, as well as building community. And there's a number of benefits, obviously, behind being able to bring employee resource groups and D&I programs into your organizations. But just a couple to sort of call out. First, it encourages diverse opinions and ideas from employees, but it also creates a culture that welcomes differences, as well as developing a strong sense of community in organizations. So how we encourage our customers and how we do it ourselves at Facebook is to create employee resource groups as a great way to connect people who share the same identity and build a system of support for people who might be underrepresented in your organization. So some examples that we have at Facebook: Black at, Women at, LGBTQ at, differently abled at, parents at, and many, many more. And also by creating a diversity and inclusion wiki group with links to resources such as training programs, webinars, events, social groups, and support groups to help drive inclusion, that will really help educate and bring together allies across the community. It's so important within community to build a culture of innovation. And I love this quote from Barbara at PBS. I need to call out that PBS are currently not a Workplace customer, but for me, it really epitomizes another strong part of what it means to build community within your organizations. A great idea can come from anywhere. You just have to give people the ability to have a voice in your organizations and be listening to them when they share that idea. So at Facebook, we host hackathons, a number of them, which are an extremely important activity for us. And some of our brightest, boldest ideas have come from these opportunities to unlock or make things better. One of the best features from Facebook that came from a hackathon was the reaction, the reaction that came out of that, and that was how that came to be. But at the beginning of the pandemic, we participated in a global hackathon to see what products we could build to help people around the globe. And this was promoted by line managers to allow people to take time to participate in projects like this and to expand their network and ultimately work on something that matters to the world. And I just wanted to call out another example from within our customer base, an example from a few years back. Kevin Johnson, the chief executive of Starbucks, during the 2017 annual shareholders meeting, told a great example of how an idea, or how you can basically come up with a new product idea from anywhere. So they had recently come onto Workplace, I think it was about 3 months previously, and had built up a really large store managers community. And one store manager posted that they were selling upwards of 20 beverages of an item that was not on the official menu, but was on Instagram. And they weren't sure whether they had the right recipe or not. And he wondered whether other people, one, were having the same thing happen, or was it unique to his particular store? And did anyone have the recipe so that they can compare notes? So within a 24-hour period, another 40 other managers posted underneath his post to say that was absolutely the same for them. And that evening, the category marketing team picked up on the chain of posts within Workplace and how much the beverages featured on Instagram was selling in the stores. So the next morning, they made the decision to add it to the official beverages menu and share a recipe with every store manager on Workplace, something that could have taken weeks or months to happen before Workplace happened within a one-day period. And going back to that stat previously, right at the start of the presentation about frontline workers, having great ideas and not having a place to tell anyone about it. This is really the value of actually having all of your people in a community in one place. Even for furloughed companies, you can still create a culture of innovation at this time. A UK-based burger chain with around 2,500 employees, currently 98% furloughed. They have what they refer to as Honest College, which offers a balance of personal and professional training sessions, but always ensures that the barrier between work and personal development is not breached. And so some examples of what they've been sharing and giving people the opportunity to access during the pandemic, things like managing finances, mental health tactics and how to cope with them, as well as just ensuring that they're walking away with skills that go beyond their day-to-day tasks. So one other example I just want to highlight is, for those of you that don't speak Spanish, like me, on the right-hand side, is from Telefonica, who are a cell phone provider based out of Spain. Their global chief executive, Jose Maria, recently posed 3 questions to Telefonica's global community on Workplace. The first question was, what company do we want to be post-coronavirus? Second one was, what have we learned? And the third one, what do we need to change? Now, his rationale for asking these 3 questions of the global community of employees within Telefonica was, we're all going through this together at the moment. The problems and the hard times affect every single one of us. We should also find solutions and opportunities together. And I really love the fact that, you know, he looked to the organization for ideas about how to better the company and how to look at the post-coronavirus workplace. Now, this was an interesting stat that came out from Edelman's Trust Barometer. They did a pandemic edition about 3 weeks ago, and they found that fewer than 1 in 3 respondents, around 29%, believe chief executives are doing an outstanding job responding to the demands on them placed by the pandemic, as compared to scientists at 53%. And there's never been a greater opportunity for chief executives and leadership teams to communicate and earn trust from their employees and create and take their place within the communities during this time of crisis. Today, as many of you know, leaders are responsible for communicating company values, building lasting culture, serving their customers, leading from the front lines at times of issue, and driving long-term value for shareholders. But people inside and outside the organization now expect to know the person behind the job title and understand what makes them as human beings tick. People want to work for an organization where leaders are connected to people. And it's been found that having accessible and visible leaders is one of the key ways that you can keep your top talent. So there was a survey that was done by Brunswick, who are a global corporate advisory firm, found that after pay and benefits, the factors that had the most impact on them staying in their current job or role after pay and benefits, which you would absolutely expect to come out at number 1 and number 2, were both connected to leadership visibility, with over 90% saying very or somewhat important to leadership that communicates directly and transparently, and leadership that you recognize and respect. And that came above a company's purpose. Now, of course, a company's purpose is incredibly important, but I thought it was so interesting to see how much leadership visibility is really raised up and recognized as something that you want to see within the organizations that you work for. But you can't respect someone if you don't trust them, and you can't trust someone if you don't know them or get to hear from them on a regular basis outside of just task management or line management. But sadly, we know that there's a little bit of a disconnect between how leaders think that they're showing up and how they're being perceived by their people when they show up. In today's business, you cannot lead from an ivory tower or as the Wizard of Oz did behind a curtain. And there was a quote that Sheryl Sandberg made, which basically said, like, true leadership stems from an individuality that is honestly and sometimes imperfectly expressed. Leaders should strive for authenticity over perfection. But I want you to think about the best leader that you have ever worked with, someone who has not only delivered amazing work and programs, but built and enabled trust, led with as well as set purpose, and delivered with honesty and transparency, and someone you could relate to and connect with. Now, I'm sure many of you are thinking about that person. I know I am. And the chances are, when you think about that person, you'll recognize some or all of these character traits in them. Anyone can be a leader, but these are the traits that separate a leader from a great leader, who motivates and inspires a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal. Authenticity, so having the courage and openness to show up as your full self. Empathy, understanding that two people may see the world very differently and being open to alternative perspectives. Generosity, the desire to give more than you take. Humility, having great pride in your work without ever being arrogant. Transparency, being clear and honest in all of your communications. And then lastly, vulnerability, the strength to show weakness and own up to and apologize for and learn from any mistakes that have been made. And ultimately, as you know, that we've seen and we know, it comes down to mindset and having the willingness to be seen as a person. So how do we translate that into how leaders are showing up on channels? One of the silver linings to come out of the pandemic for me is that leaders are finally waking up to the fact that they need to be authentically visible, and what that truly means. Here are some examples from some of our workplace customers, as well as within Facebook. But the thing that they all have in common is that they connect through stories. They're not afraid to show emotion and vulnerability, and they're regularly visible and accessible to their people. So I just want to call out a couple of them. Bottom left-hand side, we have Tom, who is the co-founder of that UK burger chain that I mentioned that did Honest College. And he has been hosting HIT classes, so high intensity training classes twice a week from his living room during the pandemic, dressed in 1980s exercise gear, which is fabulous. And so many people have been turning up to exercise together. Top left-hand side, we have Philip Janssen, who is the Chief Executive for British Telecom, UK telecommunications company. And he was the first FTSE 100 CEO to contract coronavirus before we all went into lockdown. And he has been effectively running BT through Workplace, regularly doing, weekly, doing lives to the organization, updating them on business updates, as well as his own health updates, and keeping them engaged as to what's basically going on, as well as answering any questions. And then top left-hand side, we have Nicola Mendelsohn, who is the European, Middle East and Africa Vice President at Facebook. And like many of you, she is a work from home parent. And as we saw from the video right up at the front, we have all got either furry colleagues that have jumped all over us, and or children that don't seem to know, mind, care, recognize that you might be either on a live broadcast or on a video call with colleagues. And she has absolutely embraced the fact that she has had these interruptions, as she should. Her son recently came running into the room as she was doing a live to Facebook to basically tell her that he'd kicked his football over the fence. And could she go and speak to the neighbor? And she was like, she took it all in her stride, and she was like, hey, I'm live on Facebook. Do you want to say hello to everyone? To which she was like, oh, no. Like, hi everyone, and ran out the room. And it was just a really nice way of actually showing the vulnerable situation that we're all in, and that we are all in this together, and recognizing that's absolutely fine, and this is going to be our life for the moment. So the thing that makes all of their appearances interesting and impactful is that they've all chosen to use video as their communication. And we know that 70% of communication is nonverbal, which is why they chose this medium of choice, to improve the effectiveness of their message and the emotional connection with their audience. As you know, if you've listened into to any of my presentations previously at Facebook, Mark hosts a weekly live Q&A. This is what it looks like when we are in the office, so when we are in California, to the whole of Facebook. And we're encouraged to ask any burning questions that we have, no matter the subject or sensitivity, live in the comments or through a pre-meeting online poll. And the meeting's recorded and shared for everyone to see. As many of you know, we are currently in the press at the moment, and our Q&A is happening a couple of days earlier tonight. Straight after this webinar, I will be going on to it to hear him respond to what's happening within the employee base and the wider world. As I'm sure you can imagine, it's like an incredibly interesting time to be part of Facebook. So in October for the last year, for the first time ever, Mark shared our internal weekly live Q&A publicly on Facebook. So for those of you that haven't seen what a Q&A looks like, and we tend to follow the same format every single week. I encourage you to go and look at his Facebook account. It's still up there. This is the video that's basically playing here from the 4th of October last year. You don't have to friend him or follow him. You can just access the video, and it's a wonderful insight onto how we do things, and our openness, and how we truly encourage our people to have a voice, speak up and ask hard questions, so that we can all reflect and learn and get better every single day. So a few more examples of actually how leadership teams are using workplace within the company. So they are doing these regular, as I showed you with Nicola Mendelsohn, these live Q&A sessions with leaders, but also site directors. So like looking at when we potentially might be opening offices, working with the safety, our global security teams and safety teams, etc., and answering any questions that come through. Video updates on how senior leaders are working from home. So we've had a huge amount of work from home tips coming through, as well as you know, how to deal with being a parent at home. And they've been hosting virtual coffees and team building exercises for their immediate teams, as well as commenting on fun videos that we have, participating in global challenges, and absolutely being a part of SAD work from home meals. But there's so much more that is going on that I don't have a whole other presentation for you. So just a couple more slides before we get into the Q&A. Ultimately, the way that you are going to create the best community that you can have within your organizations is by bringing everyone together. You do not want to create a them and us culture. You want to make sure that everyone within your organization, no matter what their level, no matter what their role type, that they are coming together. You're giving them an environment to talk and to be heard, and ultimately so that they can work together to create the best work environment and the best organization that you can bring. So my final slide, just as a reminder on connected companies, they're communities where everyone in the organization has a voice. And they're underpinned by a culture of openness. There's no point in bringing everyone into a community only to withhold information and access to people. And that culture starts and has to be facilitated at the top by engaged leaders who not only understand the power of community, but also the active role that they need to play in the community. They're integrated throughout, where teamwork and collaboration is not just encouraged and built for, as I said at the beginning, but where teams who have previously not worked together come together to work on shared visions and outcomes. And lastly, they're organizations that put their people first. So I'm going to hand back over to Kayla now. I'm going to have a sip of water and find out if anyone has any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Abby. And just as a reminder to all attendees, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat window. Okay, so the first question came in earlier on. Elise says, my organization has recently shifted back to traditional workplaces after an unprecedented 2 months work from home mandate. As we transition back to the traditional workplace, we are mandated to keep 6 feet apart and some are still on rotating days. How do we continue team building in this new normal when some of us are not physically in the office?
Yeah, it's a question that, or a situation that we're all going to increasingly find ourselves in. There's so many different industries that I've been speaking to over the time that, again, as we start to come back, are trialing different ways of working, be that, you know, different ways of pacing out desks, having, you know, 3 weeks on, coming into the office, 3 weeks off, you know, those different sort of rolling rotations. I think the same principles apply to how we have all been working. So going back to to what I said previously about, building a culture within and actually creating activities where you do recognize that actually you might have some people in a work environment, yet still very remote from each other because you're naturally very separated. I know that at Facebook, we're talking about not having any of our small meeting rooms available to be used, etc. So there will still actually be, I think, a lot of, even when you are back in the office, a feeling that you are still remote or isolated working. So it's being very aware of that and making sure that you are still continuing to collaborate together in a digital environment, that you're not just continuing to go back to having conversations that are potentially just, shouted from one side of the office to the other, and that you're really bringing together your colleagues who are outside and working remotely. In fact, we're actually going to be at the IABC conference in 2 weeks' time. So if you are coming to that, there's going to be a session that we're running, which is around how to create a virtual brainstorm and some tips on actually how to collaborate. And that's going to be run by someone from our Instagram team who has put together this amazing way of actually running a virtual brainstorm. So there's all these different techniques that you can do. We also have a hub, which I'm going to share a link to afterwards, with different ideas of actually how to continue to ensure that you are all coming together in a digital environment, and so things aren't being lost.
Great, thank you, Abby. The next question: if executive management is not showing compassion, empathy, etc., what's the best way to bring that up? Who should broach the subject?
Oh, you guys, I love these questions. I mean, honestly, everyone and anyone that is seeing this, obviously, you need to be mindful of how that leader may react with too much of a public outing. But we all have a responsibility within our organizations to enable safe and decent workspaces. So if someone is being is not showing the traits of being compassionate, then it does need to be shown and called out. If there's anyone that is a trusted advisor and someone that they listen to, then I would recommend trying to get them to speak to that individual, and or bringing through examples of where people have felt uncomfortable, or that has not been something that they've wanted to see.
Okay, great. Thanks, Abby. There were 2 questions around sharing the slides and also the intro video that they loved. So I just want to remind everyone that we will be sharing the slides, and the video is embedded in the slides. So you will definitely be able to see that again. The next question: my global company has been hosting weekly themed happy hours and coffee breaks since working from home started. Lately, attendance has been low. What virtual activities can I host to keep my work community connected while we are still working from home?
There's definitely a feeling of happy hour and coffee, not like overwhelm, isn't there? I don't know about you guys, but having done almost 3 months in now of being in this apartment, there's some weeks I don't want to speak to my friends in the evening and have virtual wine sessions. So don't feel that this is just something that's happening within your organization. It's definitely, I think everyone's just getting a bit fatigued about being in lockdown. In terms of some other activities that you can look to run, I think the thing about it is always really finding what is the reason behind it. So is it just like a straightforward Q&A, or is there some sort of update that you can bring, or something that's going to be valuable to people that you can get? Either there's been a question that's been asked and you can bring together a couple of people to have a conversation, and then start to build in a live Q&A. We've seen some great examples of Q&As that have then, or coffee hours that have turned into jamming sessions. So, you know, people playing different instruments and singing together and sort of like coming on board to kind of like, you know, get behind a particular song. We have seen, you know, obviously the hats, etc., the different sort of like backgrounds that you can put on. And then I don't know if you guys saw the California. In California, there was an animal retreat that was giving you the opportunity to bring a llama or a goat or a different like farmyard animals that could then join your video conference calls and just be like for 15 minutes, you just basically watch them eating grass. I mean, there's so many fun ideas basically at the moment is what I'm trying to say. And definitely on the remote resources hub, you should be able to find a little bit more, but also take inspiration from what you're seeing on, you know, from like Jimmy Fallon, etc., and what they're doing and bring that through into work.
Great, thanks, Abby. The next question, do you recommend testing this first with a small internal group before rolling it out to a large organization?
Yeah, we have seen it done a couple of ways. We absolutely, depending on the type of organization and the complexities, we would always look at potentially doing a small pilot with a particular business area or market, and then, you know, phasing it into, that's definitely something that we can look at. But we have also we have one of our largest customers, I won't mention their name, who did just enable all 150,000 people on the same day, which actually wasn't their plan. But it worked absolutely fantastically, and they have an incredibly engaged audience now. So yeah, there's definitely different opportunities and different ways that you can do it. As long as what I would say is it comes back to the fact that you want to give everyone within your organization a voice. So if it has to be that your intention is to bring everyone in, because you're then not going to see the value of workplace. But I absolutely understand having a pilot with different worker types, etc., within a market and or a business area to just make sure that this is the right fit for you. Also, I cannot believe I've just been talking about llamas and goats on this IABC call. This has turned out to be a bit different than I was expecting.
Keeps it interesting.
Well, you know me, always happy to answer all the questions that come in.
So the next question we have, when it comes to retail types of organizations like a bank, how do you balance the frontline staff who have to be in the office and corporate employees who get to work from home and not accelerate that divide mentality?
Yeah, and we have a number of banks, financial services organizations and also manufacturers that use our platform. And I'll give you an example from the UK. So the Royal Bank of Scotland, who, well, they used to be previously the Royal Bank of Scotland, they're now NatWest Group. And they had exactly that issue. Well, they wanted to ensure they weren't going to have that issue. So they do have obviously their whole employee base actually on the platform. And they are incredibly mindful about what type of communication goes to what different group types, employee types. So as I said previously, not all communication needs to go out to everyone. So there is a way of actually having all of your cultural programs that come together that brings everyone through within a group. And so having that as more of your social group, your FYI group, etc. And then having specific groups for different worker types where you have different types of conversations. That's not to say that you're trying to separate them, but there is always going to be different types of communication and tips and advice that you need to be sharing that are relevant for frontline versus work from home. And it's worked incredibly well of actually sort of like really being quite honest about, okay, what are all the different types of communications? What are all the different topics and categories? What needs to go to everyone? What needs to go to specific groups? And where do we then also need to bring them back in together? So thinking about it in that way has definitely helped them to have harmony. But also they've been doing lovely activities where they have been recognizing frontline workers. So They recently did a clap for frontline workers where you were encouraged to just, either with your phone or your computer, start clapping and send in, like a 10-second, 30-second video of that. And they put it together in this amazing montage, basically thanking the frontline staff for being in the office. And it included everyone from the chief executive right the way through. And in fact, they had so many videos that came through, and they put that onto Workplace, and not only into the main group, but into the frontline group. They had so many videos that came through. They actually ended up turning it into social media assets and putting that out as a way to actually show external recognition for their frontline workers as well.
Great, thank you, Abby. The next question, what is a good way to get leadership to recognize that they are not actually being open, transparent, and engaging with staff?
So other than showing them that you've got no activity, and it would be really good to kind of to see and hear from them, is actually asking. We've done this ourselves within Facebook, but we've also encouraged customers to do it, where you pose 5 questions in a survey around leadership, visibility, and transparency. You're not specifically calling out an individual, but you basically ask questions along the lines of, do you feel informed and engaged? Strongly agree, your usual sort of like bits that come through. Has this increased, decreased, stay the same in the last 6 months? Which campaigns or activities have you seen and liked the most? Tick, 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 tick. What else would you like to see from them? And actually sort of like arming with data that comes back to actually show to them that this is something that population want to hear. And they want to see, and therefore you need to take up your place, but also showing them what good looks like from other leaders who are very visible, and showing them the very nature of change and culture that you can bring through into your community is also a really good way of doing it.
Great, thanks, Abby. Another kind of take on the hourly workforce here. So for a large hourly workforce that does not even have company email and works in remote areas, does this still work? In other words, do employees engage in group conversations after work shifts? If so, does this create a legal obligation to pay them even though they're clocked out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not going to sidestep it. But what I would say is I did a whole presentation on on this particular topic back in January. So if you go back onto the IABC website, onto the webinars bit, you've got an hour of me talking specifically around frontline workers, and that goes into depth about talking about access codes that you can send out to them, but also in terms of actually making sure that you create a sign-in, an opt-in that basically says any activity that basically happens on here is not, you are not going to get paid for it. That's not the right wording. Please don't quote that as my wording, because I am not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination. But it basically goes through the theory and gives some practical examples of how the likes of Petco, etc., have actually rolled it out for their hourly workers in a way that has meant the requirements have all been met, but also that actually Petco workers, store associates have actually wanted to be a part of it, because there's a huge value of actually the content that's being created on it. So every company is unique in terms of how they operate it, but I would urge you to go and listen to that webinar. And if you've got any other questions, obviously do come back to us and we'll put you in touch with the right people.
Great, thanks, Abby. The next question, we're seeing our leaders perform in our weekly video meetings. Some are better at it than others, and it can come across as gimmicky and disingenuous. What advice would you give to people who aren't comfortable on camera?
Practice. Honestly, I hate being on camera, and yet I think I've probably, we were having this conversation before we got on. I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel at the moment, because I have literally done hours and hours of camera work, and I'm now, hopefully you guys are seeing, I'm quite relaxed in front of the camera, particularly on Q&As, etc. So it's just about getting over the hurdle and getting comfortable with not only what you're saying and how to say it authentically, but actually how to best present yourself on camera that isn't stiff, gimmicky, or disingenuous. So what we basically say for any of the leadership teams that I've trained is set up a one-to-one group with yourself and your comms person, and just get used to comfortable about recording, going live to recording videos directly in there. And then, as much as we hate watching ourselves back or listening to ourselves on, you know, as an audio, like voicemail, etc., it's doing that actually is going to make you comfortable, and being very honest. Okay, yeah, I can see what you're saying on this. So it is a trust and a confidence piece, but practice is really the only way, and showing them, you know, what do you think about this? And it really does come, and they do start to relax. But that's what we've seen time and time again over the pandemic. The more that their leaders are doing it, the more relaxed. So, you know, some of the leaders that we, not within Facebook, within our customers, who would just, I'm not getting in front of, you know, camera, etc. Now, 12 weeks in, they're killing it. They're absolutely killing it. So it is just a practice to build up confidence.
Great, thanks, Abby. The next question, what are your thoughts on communicating to the 80% of the workforce, especially those on the floor, without corporate emails? Is there anything beyond flyers, memos, posters that may be more impactful?
Workplace.
Shameless plug.
Well, I mean, honestly, it is, you know, by giving them a community platform where you can engage with them in dynamic forms of content, where they're able to, you know, hear live from you know, store managers, regional managers, the chief executive, the chief people officer, etc. As you know, the health and safety, you can do trainings. I mean, honestly, I know I work for Workplace, but finding a product like that is absolutely going to work for you. You know, virtual town halls are going to have to become, I think, something for the future. And again, about how you're actually going to bring that through and make it engaging for people is something we also need to consider.
Wonderful. That's great, Abby. Thank you. The next question, videos and imagery are nice, but how do you know they work? What metrics does one use to measure success of a video versus traditional communication?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that that digital communications is easier to measure than traditional. You know, how do you measure a poster? Just because you put it in the break room where it had the potential to be seen, how can you actually measure that it actually did get seen? Whereas when you do a dynamic post, like a video, or you know, just a copy with images, etc., you're able to see seen bys. You're able to see reactions, you're able to see comments, you're able to see drop-off points in videos, but also then what happens outside of engagement rates. Did that actually have the behavior change that you needed to take place, and or, you know, get the messaging across? Is there something that happened as an offline behavior, and how have you basically tracked that through? Understanding as well as satisfaction on that side. So yes, I know I have a background in social media, and I've always been hugely advocate for digital communications, but quite honestly, there's so much analytics that we can give to you in terms of actually showing success, being able to see what parts of your organization, not down to individuals, but what parts of your organization have actually seen messaging versus haven't. So it really gives you a really good understanding of which parts of your organization are engaged, and whether there's opportunities and needs for you to do some form of offline campaigns to bring them into the digital community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abby. We have time for about one more question, just to keep in mind that everyone has signed on for an hour here. So the last one that we'll ask is, we're made up of a wide range of ages, experiences, backgrounds, and role types. How realistic is it to turn this into a community?
I mean, so realistic. I mean, every organization is full of, you know, I think it's 5 generations are now in the workplace. So pretty much every organization that we deal with across different sectors have that same scenario play out. And it's amazing just when you actually bring the power of community into an organization, how much people you didn't expect to get behind and be lent in and really be visible are. Some of the ones that you think that will be aren't. And yet actually what it does is it brings together a unique way of people actually wanting to help each other. So, you know, the example that I gave from Starbucks, you know, as soon as someone posted that within 24 hours, that was being dealt with, and so many people had actually jumped in to say, yeah, I'm doing it, and offering up different recipes, etc. It's incredible when you actually do bring it in. So I wouldn't be dissuaded from the fact that you have multi-generational or different worker types, etc., because actually people are people and they want to connect and they want to help each other. They just sometimes don't have the availability to be able to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all that insight, Abby. And thank you to all the attendees for taking the time out today. Just a reminder, we will be sharing the recording and the slides following this webinar. Workplace also has 2 future webinars with us, and they will be featured quite a bit in our virtual conference. And if you have any questions that we did not get to, I do apologize. There were a lot that came in. Please do send us an email, or you can follow up with Abby at Workplace as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I'm about to do something a bit weird, and I am going to type into, here we go. There is the link to the Remote Working Hub, which has tools, tips, and advice to keep people informed and connected so that your people can stay apart when together. As Carla said, we have got those 2 webinars coming up in June, end of June and the end of July, but we are going to be at the IABC Global Conference, 14th to 17th of June. So you'll see us there. I'm going to be doing a keynote on the Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, and we'll have a couple of great guests. So please do make sure you join us for that. And we're running other masterclasses, as I said, virtual brainstorm, etc. But it's always so lovely to join you guys. Thank you so much for being so engaged. I hope you found it useful. And again, as always, if you want to find out any more information about Workplace and how we can help you turn your organizations into connected companies and communities, visit our website, workplace.com. And I look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Have a great day.